Of course, the big movie, Hollywood movie that's causing quite a big stir is Noah. It sparked a lot of interesting discussion between people across the world around the story from the book of Genesis and whether they believe it to be true or not true. And with us in studio, we have Gareth Stead, who is pastor of His People Church, and on the line, biologist Ricki Allardice, who joins us on Skype to give us a bit of their insights on what they think about the movie and how it's being depicted on film. I want to start off with you first, Gareth. I mean, the concept of taking a biblical story, especially one of such, I guess, big importance, and putting it on film and perhaps not telling it to its truth as it's depicted in the Bible. What do you make of that?
Well, look, firstly, thanks for being on the show. Koteko, great to be with you guys.
Yes.
I think the director, Aronofsky, actually was interviewed. He was asked what was his goal with the movie, and he actually said something very interesting. Mm-hmm. He said his goal was to make the least biblical movie.
Yeah.
And I've kind of watched a lot of reviews on the movie, and a lot of the experts are saying less than 5% of the movie is actually true to the biblical account.
Wow. When you take a story like that and you look at it, is it one that we should take literally as it happened in the Old Testament, or is it something that we should look at as something we should learn a lesson from, rather?
I think you definitely must take it literally. If you read Genesis chapter 6 to 9, it takes you about 15 minutes to read.
Yes.
And it's very clear from the biblical narrative that it's a story of history that existed about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Even Jesus himself referred to Noah in his own statements, and even the biblical record shows it in his genealogy. So it very much is a literal story of history.
Ricki, thank you very much for joining us on the line. I mean, you are a self-proclaimed atheist, as I understand. Am I correct in saying that?
Ricki, morning, Koteko. Well, I'm a scientist primarily.
Yes, yes.
So, yes, I suppose I am an atheist as well. But I think, to comment on that point, this is the 21st century now, and we really do have to think of things scientifically. I mean, that's what separates us from the rest of the species on Earth, is the fact that we've got logical reasoning. So if we look at the story of Noah and the ark, there's just absolutely no geological evidence for the event at all. And it's just a logistical impossibility that it really happened. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I really think we need to get past that.
Gareth, your response to that, to the fact that scientifically there's no evidence of it happening?
Look, I think first we must understand the Bible is a book of God's plan for man and his love story. However, it's still scientifically accurate. I mean, I respect the different views of different people out there. We all have the right to our views. Mm-hmm. Personally, my view is to believe what the Bible says as what is true. And that is a step of faith I take. But I think it takes even more faith to believe in an evolutionary explanation for the origin of man and the origin of all of creation. Yeah. And so whether you're an evolutionist or a biblical creationist, I think you're still making a step of faith here. Mm.
Ricki, your take on that, because I mean, obviously, as you just said, you don't believe that it ever happened, the story of Noah's Ark. So why, in your mind, do so many people believe the story? Is it all just a matter of faith?
Look, it must be. I mean, it's also got a lot to do with the way society is. I mean, we've brought up in different environments, and personally, I came from a very staunch Afrikaans background, or Platteland Dorpie, where you had this kind of stuff drilled into you from when you were born, you know? So people are raised not to question. And I mean, if you're a kid and your parents tell you the story, you follow that. But just to comment on the previous point, I think that the onus falls on Christianity to prove that the flood actually happened. I mean, science is... People don't even debate about it. I mean, it's quite silly, really. There's why argue about something that we know didn't happen based on the evidence? I mean, to believe in evolution, it's not as if we're taking some leap of faith. This is backed up by thousands and thousands of accounts by scientists who've literally spent their whole life studying this, you know. Yeah. It's based on logic and reason. So the onus is on religion to prove that the flood did happen and that Noah's Ark is real. I mean, we don't have to prove anything, really.
It's all that big question, though, you know, just because you can't prove it doesn't mean that it is not true. But let's try and look beside that point, regardless of whether the story is true or not. Do you think that there's an important lesson still to be learned from the story, Gareth?
Oh, absolutely, Koteko. I'd say the whole story of Noah actually doesn't talk about what people think is a story of judgment. It's actually a story of mercy. Mm-hmm. You know, man was destroying himself. The world was so corrupt, wicked, and evil. And the Bible actually says that this broke God's heart. Mm-hmm. And so man was going to kill himself anyway. But because God's a holy and righteous God, he did judge the world. But before he did that, he provided the way of escape. And he showed his love, he showed his mercy. Because Noah stood out as a man who found favor in his eyes, he then gave Noah the plan of escape. And that points to Jesus today, who provides the way of escape from the judgment of God because of rebellion and sin that is in the world.
And Ricki, from your side, do you believe that there's any lessons to be learned from the Noah's Ark story, whether it be true or not?
Yeah, I think there's a contemporary lesson to be learned, and that's that people should rather focus on what's real than believing a story that's completely that can't be true. I mean, if you just look at the scientific evidence, like how would he have put 2 of every animal onto a boat? First off, it's a logistic impossibility for him to round up all of those animals and put them on the boat. I mean, he'd have to go to South Africa, Asia, South America, all over from Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. There's no ways he could have done it. So the lesson I think people should learn from this is that focus on what's real. You know, there's a lot of divisiveness created by religion, and it's not necessary.
Thank you very much for your opinion there, Ricki. That's Ricki Allardice, biologist and scientist, and we have, of course, Gareth Stead, who is pastor at His People's Church. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for both of you for your insights for today.
Thanks. Good day.
And I guess that's exactly the big conversation that's going on right now. So what are your thoughts on Noah's Ark? You know, did it really happen? Is it a metaphor for a moral lesson? Now, if the world was flooding and you had, you know, the time to do one last thing, what would it be? What would you want to do? And if you could only take one thing on that boat, because it's the last thing you could take, what would it be? Let us know on our Expresso Morning Show SABC3 Facebook page. We'll see you after this short break.